Hi. Today I am chatting with Emily Veno from Prisma. Prisma is a relatively new education platform online, and they're doing something super cool. They are giving kids the flexibility to explore their own interests with the support of a really talented, experienced education coach and the support of their peers. So it's a cohort-based online learning environment. And the people at Prisma developing the program are also developing some cool tech platforms, ways for kids to feel comfortable learning online and to be as self-directed as possible. Part of my interest in this trend of self-directed learning is, how do we assess that? How do we as parents know what our kids are learning, track their progress? How do educators assess creative projects? And Emily Veno is the head of curriculum at Prisma, and she has dived deep into the world of mastery-based portfolio assessments. What is that, Hope? Well, we're going to find out today with Emily Veno. And think of old report cards with grades and, very rote responses from teachers, mass produced, and then think of kids being involved in their own assessment of what does mastery look like. The kids are very much in the driver's seat of what they're learning and assessing how they're learning it, when they understand it, when they really get it. And creating with their coach and their peers a track record of what they are learning for the year. And I thought that was so cool. So for more details, jump into this conversation with me and Emily Veno from Prisma Learning. And please leave me any questions, any ideas in the comments below. I look forward to hearing from you. Enjoy this chat.
So my name is Emily Veno, and I'm the head of curriculum at Prisma. So my background is not really in traditional schools at all. I've worked for theaters and in the arts for a lot of my career, and then got my master's in education at Harvard, where I started working with Professor Karen Brennen, who is a really well-known constructionist and likes to think about learning as something that should be done through making and through representing your knowledge outside of just yourself, so other people can look at your understandings. And she is also part of the team that developed the Scratch programming language. So through my work kind of at her lab and doing research, one of our biggest focuses was learning creatively through coding, but also how do you assess a creative project? That was one of the biggest focuses of my research. So I talked to lots of teachers, mostly in computer science, but some other subjects as well around the United States, and asked them how they were thinking about assessing creative projects, and took that learning and wrote a paper about it, but then also took that learning into my work at Prisma, trying to figure out how we could do assessment in a way that aims to drive and represent learning, but not necessarily to motivate kids, because that kind of motivation is not the kind that supports learning the best, and also not to separate and judge kids. So that's kind of how I come at assessment.
I obviously am a mom, an entrepreneur, somebody who has lived in many different countries and communities around the world. And one of the trends that I'm noticing as a parent and an entrepreneur is the disruption happening in education at the moment. And one of my main passions is to shine a spotlight on some of the innovative ideas, resources, research, trailblazers in the form of kids and parents and educators, and hopefully connect people who don't have access or interaction to some of these ideas, to spark curiosity, perhaps to open people's minds as to what's possible. I think this past year has really given way more parents pause to reflect on what does learning look like these days. It's less about like just putting your kids into school, press play and wait till they finish and the outcomes are expected. I think there's a lot of parents asking questions from even a year ago. And I am thrilled about that. Even if they ask the questions and don't make any major moves, that's better than not inquiring at all. And I noticed there's a lot of fear coming up with parents around making the wrong moves, around possibly, even if the new programs or platforms look cool, if they get their child off the main track, maybe they're disadvantaging, and maybe they're using their child as a guinea pig, and they will not be able to thrive or have the outcomes that will lead to them being autonomous or successful or have a happy life. And where assessment comes in is that real tangible lever of parents saying, well, it would be cool if they were self-directed, or you're doing project-based education or learning, but how do you measure that? How do I take that, Emily, and take it to my school that I want my child to get into if they want to be a doctor or a lawyer, or not close down pathways? So what I would love to hear from you, both from your work independently, but also really focusing on Prisma, is what have you arrived at in terms of how to assess kids in the way that they learn, and what is exciting you about that, and how does it fit, do you think, in the current environment of education?
A really great question. I also love the work that you're doing and the questions that you're asking. I agree. I think this is a really exciting time and definitely a scary time, but I think getting parents more involved is fantastic, and getting them really thinking about, okay, because I think of education as something that we should all be interested in, like whether you have kids or not. We're trying to create a generation that is capable of solving the world's biggest problems. We're trying to create a generation that can, be good to each other and lead happy and fulfilling lives. I think getting parents to be interested not just in their own kids' success, but okay, well, wait, I see how education is affecting everything. What do I think the purpose should be? And everyone can have a say in that. I see how education is affecting everything. What do I think the purpose should be? And everyone can have a say in that, which I think is really beautiful. I think as far as how we approach assessment and how we kind of navigate that tension that you mentioned, which we talk to Prisma prospective parents and Prisma parents all the time about that.
I do.
I love this. I love that Prisma is teaching the things that don't get talked about in regular school, that don't get covered in regular school. But then there's that question of, well, there's only so many hours in the day. So if we're doing a bunch of stuff that regular school doesn't teach, does that mean we're not doing some of the content that regular school teaches? And that makes some parents pretty nervous. But the reality is if we want kids to be talking about future focused topics, if we want them to really learn the designer's mindset, if we want them to spend a lot of time reflecting and taking self-directed projects and taking initiative, then yes, maybe we won't cover every single social studies standard that your normal public school does. But I think as terms of assessment, you really have to think about what are the different purposes of assessment. Your normal report card, your normal GPA, you mentioned one of the purposes, which can be opening up pathways of attending an elite school, showing that you have certain skills to a job. And in our day-to-day at Prisma, that's not what we see as the purpose of assessment. The purpose of assessment is right now to, say something about what the child has learned and where they need to go.
Right.
We sort of see that preparation for future pathways as a completely different purpose, kind of see the feedback that the kid and parent is getting in the moment as separate from what we would send to a college, to a high school, to, anyone down in the future that wanted to know that. And so we take our own Prisma assessment and modify it to kind of a transcript format that any that any school could kind of understand. But we don't see that as like the core of what our assessment is, which is a lot more about feedback, goal setting,
Is
more
it
of
child driven?
so a lot of our assessment is, we definitely really care about self-assessment and really care about self-reflection. We would never assess kids on outcomes that they haven't seen before.
Right.
They need to know what exactly it is that they're going to be assessed on. And we also do conferences at the end of each learning session. So about every 12 weeks, there's a conference that has the child's learning coach, who is their mentor, and then the parent. And the conference always opens with the child presenting their self-reflection, articulating what they feel like they have learned over the past 12 weeks and what they feel like they need to improve on. And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the discussion between the coach and the parent. So that's one way. I mean, I'm definitely seeing a lot more respect for alternative forms of assessment and alternative forms of schooling. So there are tons of schools that, well, on their application, they might say we need a transcript with GPA. They're saying that just because that is typically what they get. But if you reach out to them and say, my child attends this innovative program and can present you with a portfolio of all of their projects, including reflections and a list of outcomes that they mastered, the schools are often just as excited about that, if not more, than a traditional report card. Seeing a portfolio of a kid's work, for better or worse, is a great representation of what they can actually do, and schools are always interested in that.
We had experience at the Green School. My child was in grade 3. He had to put together a whole quite elaborate project and do a video and then an assessment of the video, and it was all compiled together. And I couldn't believe that he was able to have that level of self-reflection on both the work that he did and how he felt after. And he's 2 grades above that now, and he hasn't, in a normal regular school, and he hasn't come close to that level of in-depth learning where everything is interconnected.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think initially, when you say there's no grades to kids, they get super excited, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think they very quickly realize that, I mean, they have reason to be excited because grades are unnecessarily punitive. A lot of times they don't fully represent learning, and it's not just that kids don't dread grades just because they don't want to work hard or they don't want to learn. That's not what it is. They see what is disruptive about it, and so they get excited when there's no grades. I think that's one of the biggest things, is any system with no grades that has to be mastery based. If it's truly mastery based, then not just any project will allow you to move forward or allow you to, at Prisma, we do a badge system where once you've mastered it, you kind of earn your badge. And so the amount of revision that is required to demonstrate mastery is very new for our kids. And that is what at the beginning gets them really frustrated, because it takes a while to learn to see the value in that. And I think it's a really important life skill. I think there's a lot of adults that also really don't like revising their work.
I love hearing that. I think that when there is that mastery, reflection, or inquiry, and they have to keep revising based on their own, have I mastered it or not? They start to ask themselves questions as opposed to looking to the grown-up. And that's what's so inspiring. I love that you guys are doing this. And I've been hunting around for innovative education platforms that are doing what you guys are doing. Also for people who can't attend Prisma or who are doing in person. Another opportunity that I've been seeing is for homeschooled families or families who aren't ready to go online. If there is, it sounds like you've got a tremendous amount of research and just experience thinking about mastery-based portfolios. If there ever is an opportunity for families to work with you around that.
That's a great thought. There's definitely, so Prisma is relatively new. So that's definitely on our roadmap, is to think about how can we engage kids and families that aren't, full-time regular members of our community. And one thing we're thinking about is making kind of those project resources available publicly. And part of the project resources is, and this is relatively rare when you look online for homeschool projects, is it gives you the steps of the project, but it doesn't give you the way to offer feedback to your child. It doesn't give you, tips for how to push their thinking. It doesn't give you some examples of, okay, what does like an excellent, elementary school version of this project look like versus a middle school version. And so that's, once we start making our project materials available, I think that would hopefully be a big part of it, is taking kind of that assessment piece and making it easier for parents.
I think that at some point, understandably, you have many things on the go. For parents navigating new pathways, this sort of, it feels a bit like the Wild West if you step out of the system, is to have some scaffolding. And that's valuable. It might not be something for most parents to sign up and put their child in online learning. Some parents, it's great. Other parents want to still do the physical learning and have the time and ability to do it, but they need scaffolding from people who are really entrenched and doing the research. So from your mouth and your experience, what's so exciting about Prisma?
It's so hard to choose, for sure. But I think the most exciting thing is seeing kind of the unexpected surprises that have popped up that we haven't even planned, where kids have discovered interests and discovered passions and kind of taken them to the next level of, I'm thinking of one learner who really in the first cycle just discovered a passion for technology and for coding and for every aspect of designing tech products. And this is a 4th grade learner, and he's very talented. And by the end of the year, he was volunteering as tech support for other Prisma learners. So if they had a problem, they would reach out to him and he would hop on a call with them and help them fix their issue, just because he was having fun doing that. He was designing custom versions of some of our curriculum materials. So I would look at his work and it would have like a custom like design to it, that he was making.
4th grade.
Yeah. And his projects are amazing, but it's the stuff outside of the projects that the kids are then just popping up. And then the best part about being early is when we see something that's awesome like that, we're like, oh, let's make this an established part of our program, where if you're super passionate about tech, you can volunteer as tech support and learn how to help other people. And so that's been the most exciting thing, just in general, how we've been able to take what our founding families are doing and kind of make it part of our whole system and learn from the kids and families and respond to all of their feedback. Another part of that is we're building our own, we're building 2 products right now. One of them is Prisma Live, which is our like.
I checked that out. Yeah, it's like Zoom for kids.
It's really cool. Yeah. It's like it makes it a lot easier on the facilitation end. One of the hardest things about facilitating over Zoom, is like a lot of teachers know, is that you have to have a million windows open, and it's really hard to see the kids and your plan and whatever else you need to be looking at. But we've tried to make it all on one canvas, so you can see the kids, you can see the materials, they can all see everything, and really just that simple fix, along with kind of the kid-friendly design, which is really just appealing and engaging. But those 2 things have made a huge difference for us. But one of the coolest, like, unexpected benefits of that is the kids who are a part of Prisma right now are watching this product being built, and they're interacting with developers who come to the session and ask for feedback. They're proposing ideas that then get added to the product. They're proposing ideas and then hearing why that product or that feature won't work, and learning a little bit about design. Just all of that.
So cool. I guess that goes along with learning is happening always. And I think as grown-ups, separated from those years of being a child ourselves, we forget that we are looking at the modeling happening everywhere.
At the end of the day, like, I love to think about assessment. I'd love to think about measuring things and feedback, but kind of central to all of that, like I always have to remind myself that like we are never going to be able to measure everything or assess everything, and that doesn't mean that that learning isn't valuable or isn't happening. And I think when I think about traditional systems, that's been one of the biggest problems, is there's been this attitude of, well, if we can't measure it, then we shouldn't do it. And I think that that has caused a lot of issues, but it's easy to get in that mindset.
Emily, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. And
Yeah,
I look
thank you
forward
so
to
much.
sharing this with more families and parents, and definitely want my kids to test drive Prisma, and be in
Absolutely.
touch with you and your team.
Yeah, it was great chatting with you, and I'm really excited about the work you're doing and all the stuff that you're thinking about. It's so great to get to chat with parents about this stuff.